and we'll just see what happens. I know we got a couple of invites out tonight. Let's see who shows up on this, the Friday preceding Father's Day. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here at the Weekly Roundtable. I am one of your co-hosts, Frank Johnson, co-founder of the Liberty First Foundation and host of the Range Report over on YouTube. Directly to my side is Michael Marshall.
Oh, that's me.
Oh, I hear myself again.
That's me. Sorry.
Oh, no.
That was me. I apologize.
That might have actually been me too. Sorry for the snafu. As you could tell by my surroundings, I'm not in my studio. I'm actually in a very cramped, confined space. So, hey, technical issues, they happen. Mike Marshall, co-founder of the Liberty First Foundation, to my side. Directly below us is Michael Vasquez, Dragon of the Southern Tier, New York's only true independent journalist. And we have a couple of people in the comment section tonight with Peter Sumner saying, hey-yo. And he should have the link if he should dare to come and join us. But how are you guys doing this week?
Mixed bag. There's a lot going on.
Well, there's always a lot going on.
No, I meant with me personally, just trying to keep everything going. It is, the economy is failing. Real people are feeling it in real ways, while we are told constantly everything's great. You just don't understand how wonderful everything's going. It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
Well, I'll show you how well our economy is going. Give me just a second here. Our economy is going so good.
Well,
that Social Security recipients are on track to receive the smallest cost of living allowance or increase since the pandemic began.
Well, you know what I love about that? Inflation since February of 2021 under Biden, we have had a 15% increase in inflation. Real world, 11% on food inflation, which they're downplaying and say inflation is down. No, it's not. Food, electricity, housing, the things you need to live are all up, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The government itself is telling you it is up. And they like to say, well, the headline inflation, who cares? Food, electricity, and housing are all up. They're all up at least double digits since 2021 when Biden walked in, and they're lying to us. And that's why, and inflation isn't keeping up, Social Security isn't keeping up with the increase. They haven't increased 17%. It's ridiculous.
Well, I know that we got in the car this morning at about 7:30 to make our 600-mile trip to New York today. I bought 2 bags of combos, 2 bags of chips, and 4 candy bars, and I spent $37. Okay. Oh, I also bought a little bag of white cheddar cheese crackers for the dogs in the car. That cost less than what we spent in West Virginia stopping at the McDonald's drive-thru, which was like $41 for 2 Big Mac meals, 6-piece chicken McNugget.
Go to McDonald's and get a meal. Okay, it wasn't the greatest meal for you, but you could get a meal, and it would cost you less than going to a local diner. Okay, a sit-down diner. Now, McDonald's charges as much as Applebee's does. And in a lot of cases, you go to McDonald's and you'll pay more than what you would pay to go to Applebee's or any of those type of places. Okay, Texas Roadhouse, whatever.
It's amazing that, I mean, you used to be able to get a pizza Dominoes. You used to be able to get Dominoes with meat, a large one with a liter of Pepsi and some side dish, and it'll cost you $20 net, the whole thing delivered to your house.
Yeah.
Now it'll cost you like $50. It's
Well,
ridiculous.
I love when you order from something from DoorDash and you go through the menu and your final bill for the 2 meals you paid for is $41. By the time they delivered, it was like $87.50.
What?
Yeah, how the hell did that happen? I have no idea. I'm going to bring somebody in, who's our good friend Tom. He doesn't have a camera hooked up to his computer, but hopefully his audio is up and running. And
No, it
he
was.
Well, he was. All right,
Just
so
dropped back out.
when Tom's mic runs again, we'll bring him back on. Oh man, well, I don't know. This week I've been running like a chicken without a head this week myself. I just had to have a little spinal injections this week. I finally was allowed to get out of my walking boot, and now I'm back into a soft cast. I'm making slow and steady progress, but had to come and do this trip up here to New York. It was not an expected trip. Didn't want to have to make this one, but did it anyway. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And I was sitting. I tried to keep up with the news this week, and it was like every time I turn on some form of news, something else is going absolutely insane. What do you guys have? All right, we know that a couple of weeks ago, Jordan told the FBI that if they didn't produce certain documents pertaining to the Biden bribery scandal that they've been sitting on since 2016, that he was going to bring them up on contempt of Congress charges. They finally were allowed to see the documents, certain parts redacted, and now we have a sense of what's in the documents. Now, we were told $5 million. In the last couple of days, it is now $30 million. What do you guys have? What kind of sense can you guys make of any of this?
It's not new. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I mean, it's been ongoing for, like you said, multiple years. They really haven't done anything on it. Jim Jordan and a couple of other key Republicans are pushing for these documents, but it really isn't going anywhere. Okay, and hold on, let me look at something real quick.
While you're looking at something, may I introduce myself?
Yes, I was about to do that. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm very sorry. This is my very first setup on this computer, and I thought I had everything all straight written down, and I could not figure out why there was no camera. Then it said, you need to shut down everything else first. Then you can start the camera. So my apologies. First, hello. My name is Tom Nicholson. I am here in the once great city of Stumptown, Oregon, a.k.a. Portland, home of Antifa and a whole bunch of homeless people pooping in the streets. And I was invited by Frank, who I've known for the better part of almost a decade and a half. And I just want to say hello to Michael, or I guess Vass.
Hello?
I apologize.
Voss. Just go with Voss. It's easy.
Voss, my apologies. And Tom is just fine with me as well. So again, this is the very first time I've heard anything like this, so I appreciate your extraordinary patience in giving me a little bit of leeway when I screw up so badly trying to contribute to this little chat room.
Well, Tom, if you were here for the 15 minutes before we went live, you would have seen the utter freak out that I was having on my end of the screen because my extremely expensive audio equipment decided to crap out on me after doing test runs with it all day yesterday. So, yeah, hey, these are the problems shooting from a remote location.
Yeah, unfortunately, I never got the notification that you had sent me. I was just dinking around on YouTube, and I decided to go back to Facebook, and all of a sudden, no notification, no nothing, and then suddenly there's a link. So I've been trying to get on ever since. Anyways,
Well, we appreciate you being here tonight.
I appreciate you inviting me. I hope I can contribute something worthwhile. I do have my opinions as well. I'm sure Frank is fully aware. A little bit Pollyanna-ish, but hopefully I can give a nice perspective.
And nothing wrong with that. It's always
Hey.
good to have different points of view.
And,
Always
and
enjoy it.
actually, that's what we look for, is we want
Mhm.
people to challenge us on our positions. We don't really we look for people to debate us. Okay. And if our positions align, that's great. If our positions don't, then you have an opportunity to explain why your position is better or why you have that position.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what America is founded upon, is freedom of speech, freedom to be able to state your beliefs. Okay. In fact, that actually brings me up to some here that I was looking at earlier. In Michigan, a news affiliate decided that they needed to provide unbiased coverage of LGBTQ. While
Right.
their parent company is now investigating the bosses that put out that memorandum to get both sides of the story. And they're probably going to end up firing these managers that put out this notification.
Because it's not
Okay.
supposed to be biased. It's not supposed to be balanced. It's supposed to be biased.
Yeah. Okay.
Well-
Next Media Group, who is the largest owner of local television stations, said it is conducting investigation after news director at a Michigan station told its journalists to scale back on its Pride Month coverage and get both sides on LGBTQ issues, saying their polarizing nature and it had upset some of its conservative viewers.
Remember that Nexstar Media, they're the same people who did 600 channels. Every single reporter reported the exact same verbatim paragraph of news. This was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Every single channel had the same exact conversation on the same day. They don't believe in free press. They believe in propaganda, mass produced and put out to local stations. We got to remember that when we're talking about this, they're the same people who do that.
Okay.
Well, me, I was going to say, I look at that and I hear, we want to have balanced, they want balanced news. You know what? I'm not interested in balanced news. I want honest news. Because when you try to interject balance into the news, what you're doing is you're going tit for tat.
Yeah, you're just doing propaganda
You-
for both sides.
You find one good thing about one side, one good thing about the other, one bad thing about one side, one bad thing about the other. The problem is when you have one side that ranks up abuse after abuse after abuse after abuse, and now you're going to have to say, okay, we're going to report one for one. Balance is not natural. Balance is not natural. I want the news to be an honest representation of what's going on and not a balanced representation of what's going on. Tell me what's happening and let me decide what the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifferent are. I don't give a damn what the scorecard is. I make my own scorecard. It's not for the news to determine what the score is. If you're gonna sit there going tit for tat with everything, you're painting an extremely skewed view of the way the news is actually being brought to you. And I don't want that. I want the news to be accurate. If you're gonna talk about, well, there's one plane crash for every car crash. Okay, yeah, that's one for one, but that's not an accurate representation of what's happening. We want honesty in the news, not fairness.
Right. Okay.
If you had honesty in the news, you might actually start getting fairness because people would say, we keep screwing up and then everyone keeps finding out about it. Maybe we should stop screwing up so much.
Right. The investigation comes after the new staff of Grand Rapids, Michigan based NBC affiliate received a memo on Tuesday from the assistant news director Amy Fox titled June Pride Month that said the station had received pushback from viewers who are not happy to see those pride related stories. We need to recognize that some stories related to LGBTQ issues are going to be controversial and polarizing in our community, Fox wrote. While you personally may not agree with a certain position, people are entitled to their opinions and they are our viewers. If we're covering pride events, we need to consider how to make the story balanced and get both sides of the issue, she added.
You know what
Fox
they're
further
talking about.
emphasized the need to examine newsworthiness of pride events before covering them, saying the station doesn't cover every event or festival that happens in West Michigan.
Well, before we go any further, you know what they're talking about. This is all coming out because of, and what we see mostly a lot in Pride Month are the trans, what do you call them? The strip shows with the kids. What do they call them?
Grooming.
Not the grooming, but the shows.
The drag
trans
queen shows you talking about?
Drag. That's it. I was just missing the word. It's a drag queen. They're talking about drag queen shows during the month of June. That's what it is. And they just don't want to say that people are like, stop shoving this down my throat, trying to convince me to take my children, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, trying to take them to these events that I don't necessarily want to be about. And when I complain about it, then actually report it, which is what we're not seeing. That's what the story is all about. It's not about whether or not you're gay. They don't care about that. That was an issue that was resolved in the 1980s. That's not the problem. It's not, ooh, you're gay and we can't talk about gay people. We have TV shows, movies. We have gay people in politics. No one cares. This is about trans, and it's also about MAPS, minor attracted or youth attracted people. That's what they're talking about.
Otherwise known as pedophiles.
Yes.
It shouldn't be known as anything, but I've never liked that term map. That's a rational. No offense, I consider that a rationalization of the behavior.
No, that's not something to be offensive to. That's an actual accurate portrayal of what that is. What they're trying to do is that's a soft sell technique.
They're trying to legitimize
something like that. And that's all being done at some of the highest levels in power from the UN and everybody else, because they have accepted a lot of that crap in Europe, and then they want to try and impose that on us. Sorry, but that don't fly.
Yeah.
Okay. So a journalist at the station who asked not to be identified told CNN that several employees responded to the memo via email to voice their disapproval. Our newsroom immediately stood up to the two managers who wrote the memo, mandating that we cover the other side, quote unquote, the other side of pride events. Wood TV anchor Michelle Slims wrote on Twitter, essentially requiring us to give equal time to hate and discrimination. We said no, and we will continue to fight for our LGBTQ colleagues, family members, friends, and the community. She continued, this fight is not over. Please know we are standing up for what's right, standing strong together. We will not let hate win.
All right, so she editorializes her commentary on Twitter when her job is to just read the news.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to report the facts. And she wants to, and this is, they want to talk about hate speech. This is propaganda speech. We are demonizing people for not agreeing with the political messaging, the order to obey. And she's saying, no, you have to obey. There can only be one discussion and only one way to report this news. That is propaganda and bias, implicit and explicit. Go on.
Okay. Luke Steer and Madam Odell, executive producers at the station, also publicly publicly expressed outrage over the directive. The guidance is not being followed, Steer tweeted. The only two people involved in its creation have been removed from any discussions surrounding Atwood TV Pride coverage as our corporation conducts a thorough investigation.
You will be punished for not obeying. You will be punished for not being neutral in the news commentary. You are ostracized. This is punishment. Here we go. It's so obvious.
It is. Okay. And that is a blatant.
Well, it's a violation of journalistic integrity.
Yeah. That's
This doesn't fall into the parameters of what journalism is. This falls into the lines of Joseph Goebbels. This is about
honestly,
propaganda.
If you want to really portray hate, what better method than to use the people's own words against them? Okay, so you need to do coverage of both sides of the issues and then let people make up their own minds, their own determination. And basically, what they're saying with this is that we aren't smart enough to make our own determinations. We need to be guided.
Well, plus the media also has this wonderful technique of taking the controversial subject matter and finding, okay, which is the agenda they wish to push. Let's find the most gentle, the softest angle that we can put this point of view in, and then the opposition point of view. Let's find the most extreme version of that one, so that you have this broad section in between that cuts out everybody in the middle, where everybody is just commonsensical. They'll go in and say, okay, you have, oh, well, I felt I belonged in a different body, and so, since a child, and and they try to present that little bit of confusion on somebody's half. Then they turn around, well, the opposition is a guy running at you with a machete and a swastika. They don't show the other person that just says, listen, that's for you to decide. It's for you to make your choice. I would rather you not talk about the subject matter with my children or influence my children with what your decisions have been. They don't show that person. They show the person who's so far extreme to the other side. But when you get to the middle ground and you get to the other side of the issue, they find the sweetest, caring, most gentle, non-threatening version of that they could possibly use, rather than going to the San Francisco Pride Parade and showing you people giving blowjobs to one another in the middle of the street with families with their kids on leashes watching that. They don't show you that. That you have to go to Twitter. You have to go and you have to find that stuff, because the mainstream media won't show you that extreme part of it. Now, if you wanted to show both extremes of it, fine, but they don't do that. They find the most gentle, non-threatening part of what people object to, and then they find the most objectionable people to draw the counter argument. They don't bring anybody in that could speak logically, sophisticated, scientifically, morally, or ethically. No, they just want to find the guy who just decides that he wants to blow shit up. That's what they want to find. And that's how they go about doing it. So again, when they say we want balance, well, you're not, even in your balance, you're not creating balance. You have one party on an inch away from the fulcrum, and the other part is standing at the edge of the teeter-totter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they make it look so skewed. But when you come to and you realize that we're talking about such a minute portion of the population is having such a tremendous impact on the rest of the population, then you realize that it's all agenda driven. Because there's no way that 1/10 of 1% is going to all of a sudden equate into 2 out of every 5 kids in America suddenly believes they're transgender. You don't get that. That doesn't happen.
May I step in on this one real quick? I
Always.
apologize.
Go ahead.
First off, is my microphone okay? I got a note here from the private chat. Tom, bring your not volume up a touch, and I've been trying to do that ever since.
I
Is that
took
okay
care of
now?
it. Yeah,
Oh,
I
thank you
got you
very much.
covered.
Thank you. I think I might have discussed this with you, Frank, back when we were still at the Bat Cave or whatever. But have any of you ever heard of the book After the Ball by Marshall Kirk and Hunter Manson?
No.
Okay, I'll go ahead. My biology, my origin story. Early 20s, dating myself. I decided I was going to go ahead. I wanted to figure out, this is Portland, probably one of the most left-wing cities next to San Francisco and Seattle. I wanted to find out what was this thing, homosexuality, and why was it. I said I wanted to really look it up. So I went to what we call a place called Powell Books, one of the biggest books in Portland, probably one of the biggest bookstores in the United States, from what I understand. It's huge. It's a book lover's dream come true. I went to the gay and lesbian section, and I tried to find a book that would basically help a naive young man. What the heck is going on? What is this all about? Who, where, why, et cetera, et cetera. Nearly every book I found was basically helping people who wanted to come out of the closet and that kind of nonsense. That didn't help me out at all. But finally, there was a book called After the Ball: How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s by Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen. I've been there for 2 hours, couldn't find any book that supported my help, what it is I was looking for. That sounded about right. I gave it a try. I bought it. And I finished that book in one night. It was a huge, dry read, but I finished it one night. And it really opened my eyes to basically the homosexual community and the homosexual rights movement. Notice I don't use the word gay. That's the key word right there. Gay is a euphemism. Gay is an emotion that means carefree and jubilant and whimsical. And I can count on one hand the number of homosexuals that fit that description and still have enough fingers left over to type a dissertation. The whole point of the book, it turns out that Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen were not scientists. They were not doctors. They were not psychologists. They were not psychiatrists. They were not geneticists. There was no medical degree or scientific degree on them whatsoever. Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen were PR experts. They were in advertising. This book was a primer on how the homosexual community was going to go through a massive, massive public relations campaign, a masterclass in public manipulation and advertising to convince the entire Western society into this idea. And the first part is right out of the most obvious. If you ask a homosexual person, is homosexuality a biologically predetermined orientation or is it a choice? They'll always tell you it's, they were born that way. What's the proof? They made that change in 1973, I believe, when they took homosexuality off the list of mental illnesses. But there has never been anyone that had any scientific evidence showing that their entire theory that it was mental illness was wrong, or there was no grand discovery or anything like that. It was just basically PR and manipulation. And I could do a whole 3-hour lecture on this whole book. I'm trying to get back to what Frank was talking about. One of the key things they talk about is that when you find someone, particularly what they call allies, you get the best example of our side and the worst example of theirs. And it's similar to the pro-abortion movement that basically will say that abortions as a result of rape or incest, which make up probably less than half of 1% of all abortions that are performed every single year. That is the exception that makes the rule. And it's the same thing with the homosexual community. They grab people who are exemplary members, and then they grab the extremists on the other side, as Frank was referring to, because they want to paint the narrative. And I guess what's the word I'm looking for? The homosexual rights movement or the gay rights movement has basically taken advantage of what we call this participation trophy culture, where there are a bunch of people with a huge narcissistic streak who really want to be the good guys. They want to be the heroes. And there are no more mountains to climb. There are no more dragons to slay. And so Go ahead.
Let me interject a moment, Tom,
Go right ahead.
because I think there's a difference between the political movements, which I'm very upset with, especially when we're talking about like the trans movement. That's a
Mhm.
political movement because I know many people who are trans, many people who are gay. I've known them for decades now. And
Mhm.
there's a big difference between people who are living their lives, adults that are living their lives every day. And like anyone's sexuality, you don't know until someone presents it to you. That's fine.
Mhm.
And whether it's biological or choice, quite honestly, I don't care. I don't care
Mhm.
because that's their freedom, that's their choice.
Mhm.
They're making consenting adults decisions. And you know what? Doesn't affect anyone else. You're not harming anyone, you're not harming children. That's fine. The problem I see today isn't that people are gay or that there's a gay, that people have come out as gay. It's that we have a political organization, a political agenda that are from certain, a small group of organizations that are looking to push this agenda onto children, and they are
Mhm.
forcing everyone to accept its terms. That's not the people, that's the organizations. And I think we need to be very clear. Or at least for myself, I'm not against anyone. I could care less if someone is gay, they want to call themselves a toaster. It doesn't matter what they believe. I could care less. Keep it away from children and don't harm anyone else. But the political movement is pushing it onto children, like the books you're mentioning, and that we've seen in many
Mhm.
schools. And that's negatively impacting the society. That's my problem. That I think is a violation of freedom because we're supposed to protect the innocent, which are children. And that's not what we're seeing today.
Yeah, and I understand and I agree, but again, that kind of skews into the point that I was trying to make. I did again. I could go on for hours. I didn't say anything that homosexuality was wrong or it was bad, and I'm not even saying that people aren't born homosexual. What I'm saying is there is a narrative being pushed. It could very well be that homosexuality is indeed have a biological basis. We have yet to find it. They're not even looking because the idea is more important to push the narrative that homosexuality is biologically ingrained than to actually prove that homosexuality is biologically ingrained. I have homosexual acquaintances myself. I mean, hell, Portland, Oregon. Yeah, they're you can't swing a dead cat by the tail without hitting one. So I'm not saying that homosexuals are bad or evil, or they need to be rounded up, put into camps, or slaughtered like pigs in the street, something like that. I'm saying that there is a narrative, and it could very well be that homosexuals are all 100% born that way, but no one has ever been able to prove it. And it
But
is the political narrative that has superseded any legitimate discussion we could have on homosexuality and its subsequent, I guess, for want of a better word, normalization or
Well,
cultural inclusion, or for whatever you are, however you want to describe
well,
it.
yeah, but
Go ahead.
on the flip side, on the flip side,
Mm-hmm,
all right, my sister is gay. Right, she's been gay as
mm-hmm,
far as I can remember.
mm-hmm.
There's also no biological proof that shows who's straight.
True.
yeah,
Okay, this
Absolutely. But
is not
again,
this is not
it's it,
something that
it
has listen, it's not something that can be quantified. You are
mm-hmm,
this or you're that. Okay, that's it's
mm-hmm,
whether it's choice, whether it's genetic. We don't know. We don't know. This is the way people
right.
are, and we accept people for what
Mm-hmm,
they are and what their
mhm.
life's decisions are and how they live their life. What the problem comes into is when you try to push your narrative on other people that when you talk about the whole like Lady Gaga came out with that song Born This Way about what
Mm,
12 years ago, right?
something like that.
Right. This was the narrative that was put out to everybody. And it took a long time for society in general to realize, to come to terms and come to grips with the fact that people are born a certain way. And people said, okay, you're born this way. Now, all those people that fought for equality that said from however long we go back that said this is how we were born this way, please accept us for who we are, let us have our rights the same way you would have anybody else, give us our dignity, we were born this way, fine. The problem now is that you have so many people saying I'm not who I was born to be. I'm being born this way is no longer good enough, because now you're saying I was born in this body, but I belong in that body. And you have to now twist everything that you believe as far as what is scientifically provable, XXXY, and now redefine everything. Now you take what is scientifically valid and turn it up on its head and then try to make that the norm. That's where the problem is. None of us have any problem with anybody being gay, and if you're born that way, you're born that way. If it's a choice, it's a choice. If it's predisposed, it's predisposed. I don't give a damn one way or another. Be happy. Live your life the way you want to be happy. The problem is if you're going to come in and you're going to try to tell me that you can determine that your 3-month-old child is trans, or that all of a sudden now I have to now say I have to ignore scientifically accepted fact, genetic fact, and I have to now ignore all of the scientific evidence that we've had for generations because because now it's no longer a matter of gay and straight is a matter of is or is not. You're straight or you're not. You're gay or you're not. The trans is now a matter of I feel. When you get into the I feel, you cannot then take that feel and turn it into fact and impose it on other people. And then when other people say, no, I don't believe that's the right thing, well, you're hate, you're bigoted, you're a homophobe, you're this, no. There's nothing about hate. This is about fact. This is about science. You can't turn your chromosomes on and off. When you get to that. Now, when you get into the idea of the marketing campaign, you're right. Now you're citing what you learned in this book. Okay. You're citing what you learned in that book. The marketing that they're now using, like our friend Jan, she comically calls ourselves our resident homo. That's our friend Jan. We love Jan. She's on the show with us all the time. And she brings to us the gay perspective, the gay community and everything. And she also brings us the point of being, these people have hijacked our movement. The gay community has struggled, has bled, have been tortured, have died to try and gain acceptance. And we can go back to the Happy Land fire and how these poor people have been vilified. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen my family walk away from my sister. I've seen my family walk away from people that I know and care and love, that I would do anything for. And it's horrible. But they fought and they fought and they fought, and they did it mostly peacefully. And they did it until they could gain acceptance. They gained their acceptance. Everything is cool. And now you have people that have hijacked their movement and are now riding on the coattails of everything that they did, all the effort they put into gaining acceptance. You have the trans community, the militant trans community now coming on and trying to reap the rewards that other people paid for. And they're doing so based on a lie. Because for me, I look at the trans community, I equated it to the most extreme form of political ideology that you could make. It's the most extreme political ideology statement that you could make. It's not enough to be left. It's not enough to be right. You are now going to make yourself so irrevocably different than what would be considered normal that you adopt the counterculture as a means of displaying an outward display of your political ideology, to the point where you're willing to completely disembody yourself to make a statement. Tattoos weren't enough, piercings weren't enough, high, wacky colored hair wasn't enough. Cross dressing wasn't enough. Now what's got to be enough? Let's cut the junk off. Let's try and do something else, and then let's go one further and let's drag your kids into it, and then tell you that
Right.
you are wrong for hating us. It is the most extreme form of political protest. That's all that it is, and they're gaining traction on other people's blood, sweat, and tears.
Well, let me bring up something that's important for all of us, the audience, to really get this. And it goes back to what you were presenting, Mike. This is a conversation that has a lot of nuance. There are many levels to it. There are many types of individuals. When we say LGBTQ, when we say the trans, we're talking about many different organizations, many different viewpoints with many different subtleties within it. And the news media is now saying, we can't talk about the nuance. We can't talk about the individual groups. We can't talk about the issues, some of which we may or may not agree with, the scientific background that may or may not being investigated. The core of this really highlights, and just this conversation, and thank you, Tom, for bringing it up, is that what we're being denied the opportunity to have this discussion, which back in the 70s, the 80s, we had that discussion, and that led us to acceptance and understanding and equality for Americans and others around the world. We led the way. And now we're saying there is no more conversation. There's only obedience. There's the ultimate problem. The news media just came out and said, how dare you have a nuanced conversation that takes more than a minute and a half? That's the problem. At the end of the day, all of our views, all of the issues, all of the facts that can be put into this conversation are being thrown out the window, and we're being told, no, toe the line, obey, and if you don't, you will be punished. That is authoritarian, and we need to recognize it as authoritarian and how it's hurting everyone, not just lesbians and gays, not just trans, not just straight people. Everyone is being hurt by this, because if they do it on this issue, they do it on every issue.
All right. Now,
does everyone see what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
well, to illustrate your point perfectly, Jeff Cook just brought up a perfect point, and we got it up on the screen here. California is upping their game with this bill they're trying to pass. For those folks that are in California that may or may not know about it, it's Bill AB 957. This passed through the California State House already. Now it's on its way to the California Senate. The bill stipulates that if you, as the parent of a minor child, if your child expresses that he or she has any sort of feelings of being trans and you don't immediately get them gender affirming care, that Child Protective Services is going to come and take custody of your child, and the state will give them this care. Now, if you've ever had a run-in with Child Protective Services, you'll know that when Child Protective Services makes a call to your house, they don't just come for the one kid. They come for all of them. So if you've got 2, 3, 4 kids in your house, and say the youngest one all of a sudden gets told by their teacher, because they liked playing with the Barbie doll, or maybe the little girl liked picking up a baseball glove, that you must be trans. And now your teacher, who has a political ideology, is there to indoctrinate your kid, who has control of your child for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week of indoctrination. Now your kid comes home on a Friday after school, says, Mommy, I think I'm a boy, or Mommy, I think I'm a girl. And you say, oh, knock it off. When the kid goes back to school and they say, no, my mommy says I'm not a boy or I'm not a girl. Well, the school gets to call Child Protective Services and have that child removed. And when they show up at your house, they're going to say, well, what other abuses have you been committing against your juvenile children? And they take all of your kids. And this is what it's come to. It's not so much enough anymore where you get to indoctrinate the child in the school. Now the school is just going to be taking your children. They're going to take your children. What they couldn't accomplish with red flag laws being deemed unconstitutional, now what they're going to go ahead and do, and now they're going to try and deem this into the medical realm. They're going to say that now that you're refusing to get your child the proper medical care that your child so desperately needs. You're an unfit parent. The government knows best, and we're going to take your children.
Mhm.
And this is where it has come. We have come to the point where 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you started hearing about drag hour story time in school to now the church, the state is coming to take your kids. This is how quickly a cancer spreads and how quickly this kind of thing gets normalized. And unless and until parents start stepping up and putting their foot down with this stuff, it's just going to continue to get worse. It's just going to continue to get worse.
Quick
Ultimately,
If I
question.
may,
okay,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to note, because I think you said AB 597, and I've
Yeah, it's
seen it online.
957.
And just to clarify for people, if you're looking it up, it's actually California AB 957. I know I've seen some people type in 597. It's 957, and we're showing the bill on the page. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was apologize. Again, I can tend to get long-winded, and I apologize for that. But
Mhm.
again, I was trying to get my point across before I obviously touched some nerves, and I wanted to apologize for that. I want to clarify. I am not denouncing homosexuality or homosexuals in general, or any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying though is that the point I was trying to make was we have superseded the narrative as opposed to actual, proving a point, which was, in my opinion, has dovetailed into our current situation. Has anyone ever proven that a person can be a man born in a woman's body or vice versa? Absolutely not. Where is the proof? The response is we don't need to prove it. And I believe that it's not necessarily the homosexual community itself, because there are plenty of organizations like Gays Against Groomers. I know several homosexual people in the city of Portland who are appalled that there is a T in the LGBTQ organization. They think because there's it's a whole other issue, because one person I even know, nice guy, even argues that you can't. It's not right to force a homosexual man to become a heterosexual man. It is equally just as wrong to allow a homosexual man to become a quote unquote heterosexual woman. That's his words, not mine. And I can see the
Mhm.
point he was trying to make, as ridiculous as it's an absurd that might be as an example. But he feels that the trans movement is basically, there's a lot of homosexuals who are just basically not able to embrace their homosexuality, and there are a bunch of, again, the narcissists, the allies, who are more interested in being the good guys in this group. They are more interested in this is because I'm sorry, the majority of people who are allies in the gay rights movement, I don't believe for one second that they actually do care about homosexuals or the homosexual community
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
much as they care about being the quote unquote saviors or the hero. They get this hero complex. And that's why they get upset when you say, can you prove that a man is born in a woman's body? They get upset when you say, what is a woman? Any part of that argument, because it's more about the narrative than it is about the facts. And as a result, I believe, as valid or as righteous as the gay rights movement may have been, to whatever degree, it has been bastardized into this, let's go ahead and get everything out there, 50,000 genders, transitioning kids, the whole bit. And once again, I believe, oh, who was it? It wasn't Shapiro. Someone said there was like, was it 61 or 16? I think it was 16. Um, Scientific studies in Europe, and found that there was no conclusive evidence that sexually or changing the quote unquote gender or of a child had any positive influence or a positive impact whatsoever. But you will never be able to convince the people who are pushing the idea of gender affirming surgeries and gender affirming medicines and
Well,
everything else, because it's more
Matt
about the
Walsh.
narrative than it is about the actual facts.
well, listen, I'll give you this point of view this way.
Okay.
It's coming from a different angle. Okay, come from a
Okay.
completely different angle. I buy a lot of guns.
Mm-hmm.
I buy a lot of guns, and I
Mm-hmm.
review a lot of guns. Nobody gives me guns for free. I buy them. So when I buy them and I find one that's a total piece of shit and I review it online, I tell you, this is a total piece of shit. Now, the point of me telling you it's a piece of shit is because I'm being honest about my review. The problem that I find is that there are a lot of people out there that love that piece of shit. They know it's a piece of shit, but they drop $1,200 on that piece of shit. And no matter what you tell them about that gun, it's the greatest gun that was ever made. It's called pride. It's called pride. And this is not the kind of pride that they're celebrating this month. It's the pride in saying that you can't admit when you were wrong about something. And when people have invested their time, their money, their effort into something, and it turns out to be not everything that they thought it would be, they will never tell you the truth. And they will never tell you, you know what, that was a mistake. You know, the guy standing on the side of the road watching his electric car take 80,000 gallons of water to extinguish it from the explosion that it just suffered on the highway is going to stand there basking in the warmth of the fire and telling you that it was the greatest car he ever bought. He's never going to tell you it was a mistake that I bought that thing. And when you have people that are going to cut their junk off, they're going to pull out their reproductive organs, implant something different, go through hundreds of hours of therapy and drugs and psychological treatment and everything else so they can turn around and tell you they made a mistake is not going to happen. They're not going to tell you what's going to happen. So they're going to become extremely militant in their point of view. And the best way to become militant in your point of view is to expand the number of people inside of that umbrella. Why do you think they put the brown and the black and the yellow stripes on that flag that they're now displaying? Because now it's not just a matter of trying to adopt and co-opt the gay community. Now they need to say, we don't have enough people that we can claim as victims that we can incorporate in this thing. So we're going to now include all marginalized people in this thing. So now why is the gay community so now obsessed about the rights of brown people and black people and yellow people? Well,
Safety in numbers.
if that, they need to expand the base and they need to detract and they need to say, well, now it's not only enough that you're going to insult the trans community by saying that there's something wrong with us, but now we're all under the same banner. So now if you're going to say one thing about us, you're saying one thing about all. So now if you don't agree with the trans movement, well, it's now you're not just anti-trans. Now you're racist. Now you're bigoted. Now you're homophobic. Now they've co-opted that whole brand so that they could have a larger umbrella to claim their victimhood status under because they can't justify their own position. They can't defend their own position. Otherwise, the trans movement would fly their own flag by themselves all alone. Every other group that you want to come out with has their own flag that they fly. Why is it that the trans movement has to co-opt somebody else's? Because that flag don't fly on its own. So they need to have that. Those other groups co-opted so that they can spread their victimhood mentality over a larger spectrum, so that they get more reinforcements. Because now it's not only a matter of you showing up at that rally because you're proud to be trans. Well, no, now you have to make sure that, well, do we have our token black guy here? Do we have our token Latinx? Do we have this? They co-opted everything because they don't have the ability to stand on their own, because they don't have the support, they don't have the structure, they don't have the science. They don't have any of that. So that's why they've co-opted all of this. And because...
And let's not forget also, let's not forget that the vast majority, and again, this is not a denunciation of the transgender people, because same thing like in homosexuals, it would be nice to know what the true origin of the biological basis, so we can either give them the help or the support they need. The vast majority, in my opinion, the people who kicked Riley Gaines off the winner's podium, the people who are winning all these awards, I don't believe that they are true trans. I believe they're onogynophiles. Onogynophilia are basically, well, 100 years ago, they were the guys walking around with trench coats, nothing on, flashing people when they walk down the street. But now they have this need to fetish. It's truly a fetish for them. Because I worked or used to work with a true, genuine transsexual named Pat, and he went through the surgeries and everything. Nice guy. Um, Last time I talked to him, he was. When I hear about like the transgender man who was in the woman's locker room walking around with a robe wide open, that's not a transgender. True transgenders
No.
are truly ashamed of showing off their quote unquote male physique if they believe that they're a woman. But these people walking around with robes open and exposing themselves to kids, they are not true transgenders. They are autogynophiles. They have autogynophilia. They want to, rub up against people. They want everyone to look, and they truly are making the movement look really bad. But again, right back to what I was saying, the narcissistic allies, that's a sword that they want to fall upon. It's a hill they fight for because it's more important for their own need to feed their own ego and fulfill their own gratification of being a hero and saving others, as opposed to truly finding what's going on and why. And this is where I believe the biggest problem is because again, I don't hate homosexuals, I don't hate transgenders, but the movement, the key word is the movement, the ideology, the narrative has superseded everything from the science to the common sense and everything. And hopefully what we're seeing with the burgeoning pushback, we're finally starting to see. Maybe we can find a more sensible ground upon which to stand, as opposed to the you're either with us or you're with the terrorist sort of extremist viewpoint.
Well,
I'm taking so much
honestly,
time. I apologize.
No,
honestly, okay,
Mhm.
the original lesbian, gay, even the original trans movement was to basically let us live our lives the way we want to live our lives. Okay,
Mhm.
leave us alone, treat us as people, don't treat us as this alien body, okay, that's not accepted in society. Okay, just treat us like everybody else.
Well, that
That's
was
what the original movement was about. Now
Mhm.
the movement has become this deal of, well, if you aren't a part of us, then you're unworthy.
well.
And,
They also have the superiority complex. You have a lot
if
of the
we
people in the
actually
trans
look at
movement.
if
yeah,
we
but
actually look at what's going on now compared to what was going on in the 80s and 90s when gays and even trans were starting to become a lot more accepted. We're starting to see shows and so forth, and there was a lot more inclusion of these communities. What we're seeing today is a complete flip. Okay, it is a narcissistic. It has literally become a narcissistic movement. A lot of what's going on reminds me of these people that get so many plastic surgeries done and they can't stop because they cannot accept themselves, and that's what's really going on.
but I,
Honestly, I think a lot of these people have a self acceptance problem. Okay. And I'm not talking about Jane. Jan's accepts who she is. All she wants to be have done is let her live her life. Period. That's all she cares about. Okay. And great. Jan's an adult. Jan can do whatever she wants. That's fine. Okay. These other people that are in it to showboat their gayness, to
Yes.
showboat their transness,
Mhm.
and so forth, they're narcissists. They're nothing more than a narcissist. Okay. The person like you were talking about that's parading around who's a biological male claiming to be a trans female, parading around in a women's locker room, unrobed, Okay, that's not a true trans. Because, like you said,
Precisely.
trans are embarrassed of their maleness. Okay,
Well,
a trans woman
Mhm.
is embarrassed of being a man.
well, there's also the nana nana nana. Look what
Mhm.
I got away with,
Yeah,
because it's a thumb in the eye,
yeah, it's
especially in
a
women's sports.
narcissistic tendency.
Well,
Right. It's a thumb in the eye of every. Now, I have friends of mine that, like my friend Jimmy. He's one of my closest friends. I love Jimmy to death. He's got a daughter that plays softball. She's in high school. This girl, if she decided to pitch in the professional major leagues of baseball, would probably strike out half of the guys that play. She's that damn good. The girl is a beast. She's a maniac. She's awesome. And I keep saying to myself, there's going to come a time when this girl is going to be on a team having to compete against, because she plays on the girls' league. She's going to have to compete against non girls. And you get all of these parents that are all, and I say to myself, you want to put a quick end to this crap? Pull all your girls out of sports. Pull them all out.
but
And say, but what about the scholarships? And what about this? What about that? I say, what about them? If you're gonna allow this to go on, the scholarships aren't worth anything, because they're just gonna give the
The
scholarships to
scholarships are going to happen because they'll be given to biological male trans women.
right.
but
They're gonna
here's
be the colleges need the girls in order to succeed, because the colleges all need the money. Their sports programs work off grants. They make money off of the programs. If they don't have a recruitment effort and then actually bring girls in to play the sports, those sports are going to shrivel up and die. Until parents decide to say, you know what, I'm not letting my kid play, it's not going to happen. But parents get so much invested in their kids these days, with hoping that their kid gets the college scholarship, that they get an endorsement deal, they get this, they get that. They're gonna make them compete, and eventually they're gonna make them compete in a field that they're not prepared to compete in, because somebody else decided to leave the door open. And South Park did it years ago when they had the Macho Man Randy Savage knockoff come and compete in girls wrestling, and he was breaking the backs of all the women that he was wrestling. And he was like, "Oh yeah, well this is great. I just identified as a woman yesterday, and now I'm the best wrestler in the country."
but 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 here's the thing. At the end, all of this is, and this whole conversation is rooted around the core that we have seen political movements and a political ideology usurp choice, freedom, and activities. It is affecting our children at their core. And every aspect of it that we're talking about, whether it's in the mandates of laws, the blind affirmation that we see in California, here in New York, whether it's the censorship that we're seeing on media, not just in news stations, but on social media, it all comes back to this same core thing, which is equity, which is part of the diversity, equity, inclusion movement. It is a political ideology far on the left that is trying to drag the rest of the nation and to silence everyone. The keys of what is important about this, no matter which particular aspect, and the fact is, they're making it so broad so that people fracture off into these other conversations rather than dealing with, at its core, this is about censorship, this is about authoritarianism, and this is about a lack of freedom, because at its core, that's what we're dealing with. And they're trying to, and we're seeing these political elites destroy us on these issues and let us fracture off. And we're having these other conversations without looking at the core. It is about obey. We don't have freedom. We don't have our children. And the next generation is being trained, indoctrinated into this ideology. We really need to have this conversation as a nation. We really need to speak up and say, no, parents have the right to raise their kids. And as an adult, you have the right to make choices. And the government doesn't get to silence voices of opposition or questions. And and we need to move forward with that. I think that is so critical, because out of that comes everything else. When we forget that this is about a group of political elites that have decided that equity has placed this group over everyone else, and you cannot object, you cannot discuss it. That is the problem. And it distracts us. And this is taking up so much. I mean, we're looking at Dylan Mulvaney, who recently came out as being straight. And the caricature that Dylan Mulvaney was absorbs, it's like a nuclear bomb going off. It sucks out all the air out of the area, it causes mass destruction, and it distracts you from the fact of what else is going on anywhere else.
Hold on.
That's
Hold
so
on.
important.
Hold
Yeah.
on.
Real quick,
A couple
quick.
steps back.
Go ahead. I just really quick. I didn't even realize I'm wearing the perfect shirt for tonight's discussion. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah.
Gee, nice shirt.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is in my book, in my opinion. So, yeah, I'm not trans. I just want to watch your daughter pee. That's what it is. They're not true trans. They are just basically they have this little sick little game that they want to play. Again, I think I watch other social media people such as the Quartering and such, and I have to agree. No, Dylan Mulvaney's a grift. He's a con artist. There's no way you're going to tell me that guy's a legitimate trans. No way in hell. The guy's a fake.
But wait, but take a step back though. You said that Dylan Mulvaney came out as straight.
He did.
As straight as what?
No, he came out on his.
Well, he's claiming actually. Go ahead.
Well, he came out on Twitter and he came out on TikTok, stating that he came to his parents, said that he is investigating having a relationship with women, and that this is a new expansion. That after all of this news media and press, after everything he said, he's now looking to have a relationship, not as a lesbian, but as a heterosexual male with some addition. So again, it shows us how disingenuous this whole promotion has been, and it also adds to the question, which is also very critical, not only that we should be having this discussion, but what if this whole blind affirmation movement, especially in California's bill AB 957, we have this question that is not being asked or addressed. What if you're wrong? What if we are wrong 1% of the time? I've said this before. If we are wrong just 1% of the time, we're talking about tens of thousands of children and or adults that we have done nothing to prepare for them for. We have done nothing to support them. We have not considered how this will impact them and therefore the rest of this society. And as America leads, the rest of the world follows. So we're talking about potentially millions of people around the world that we have not considered, we have not addressed, that we are not prepared for. This is, and that's assuming it's 1% of those kids that now are saying, several polls have said that up to 30%, 25 to 30% of kids now think they might be trans or something else. It's crazy.
All right, can I just point something out real quick? 3 weeks ago on this program, I said, and I believe you might even remember me saying, mark my words, one day this guy Dylan is going to come out and say that this was all a joke, and he's the world's greatest troll.
Yep, 4 weeks ago. I remember.
And he'll go all the way to the bank being the world's greatest troll, because he's been trying this shtick for like the last 5 years now, and he finally got himself a hook with it. So he's not only going to be the world's greatest troll, he's going to be the world's most expensive troll. He will have cost more people more money than Kim Kardashian earned with her shtick. So I guess, hey, what are you going to do? But I just wanted to let him know we called it weeks ago that this guy was going to come out and be a fraud. But listen, I don't want to spend all night on this topic, because I mean, it's already ridiculous enough that we even have to talk about something like this to begin with. The whole thing about these things is government really needs to stay the hell out of this.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. Government needs to stay the hell out of this. These things should not be being popularized and celebrated at the White House and turning the White House into a friggin' drag show and doing all the rest of the stuff. Listen, people, do whatever the hell you want to do. I don't care. I support your ability to do whatever you want. I, I don't care. I'm all for you doing whatever you want. Leave people's children alone. Don't solicit the children's approval. Don't try to coerce children. And don't try to convince people to believe something that they don't believe, because people, the same way you may claim that you were born a certain way, that and in the trans community, oh, I was born in a different body. People were born to believe what they want to believe. And if you don't want to be ridiculed or lamented for you believing that you should have been a certain gender versus another gender, don't belittle people for believing that you're not supposed to. That's an opinion that they have. You have an opinion that you have. Live your opinion, live your life, leave everybody the hell out of it, and don't expect special treatment from it. Nobody's expecting special treatment for quote unquote living a traditional lifestyle. Why do you think you're going to get special treatment for living something counter traditional? Leave everybody the hell alone. Leave everybody alone. Men can't get pregnant.
Yep.
Only women menstruate. Boys are boys, girls are girls. Everything else is a fucking costume. And if you are going to decry blackface, then you should also decry woman face, well, man face, and you should be ashamed that you have people that are going into sporting arenas taking opportunities away from young men or young women that have spent a lifetime honing a craft to be the best at what they could do within their classification, and you come in and take away somebody else's dream when you're number 400 in your sector and you come into somebody else's and now you're number one. You should be ashamed of yourself for doing something like that. It's not only disrespectful to your fellow athletes, it's disrespectful to yourself, because that means that you haven't been able to accept your own failure. And if you can't accept your own failure, don't expect us to accept it for you. That's a burden you carry all on your own.
And that's a silver lining of this whole mess up situation, is that we are finally seeing, if you look around, we are finally seeing the proverbial pendulum start to swing the other way. I think, Frank, I don't know if you remember back in the Batcave when I said, I think it was, what was it, 2008, 2009, when I posted about how I truly do believe there will be a grassroots conservative movement that would be the equivalent of the leftist movement of the 1960s. And it will, that's, I mean, probably one of the most successful, the most, I guess, for want of a better word, sturdy, most fortified movement would be the one that came from the ground up, proverbial speaking, as opposed to pop culture, which is basically from Hollywood and the marketing bigwigs, like they do with music and everything else. There is a movement. Look at what happened in that one. Was it in? Was it in California? The school where the entire school had to run a video promoting
Massachusetts.
Pride Month, and the students said, "Oh, boo! No, why is this being shown?" There is a fundamental groundswell of people are saying, "We're tired of this,"
Yeah,
and
it's Massachusetts.
whether
It
they
was
like it or not,
Massachusetts.
the what used to be edgy many years ago is now mainstream, which basically means the edgy kids are the ones who, like myself, I freely admit I am not a very religious person. For the first time in my life, I bought and I wear these. Not necessarily because I am a full blown Christian, unfortunately. I don't have enough faith in my heart. That's a failing on my part. I hope someday I fix that. But I want to believe. I'd like to believe, and I definitely support it. And there are more people who are there, religion, true, genuine, not the, what do they call them, Unitarians with the rainbow flag on the side of the church signs and everything else, but a true, genuine, fundamental movement of people who are saying we're tired of the nonsense, we want to get back to basics. Not necessarily a Luddite movement, but people who are turning away from advanced technology. There's actually people who are going out and getting old 45s and old records, going out and getting what's the word we're looking for? They're looking for those old rotary phones. They don't want to have cell phones anymore. They want to get old rotary phones that actually plug into walls in your home. Wow, what a revolutionary idea that is. No, not necessarily. Even the steampunk and the Renaissance movement, which are basically movements of embracing the old ways, are starting to grow just a little bit at a time, which is good because if it goes too fast, it burns out. But a
Well, we had
gradual increase
this
can
discussion
actually.
a while back.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we
We
did.
had this discussion a while back about the artisan movements that are coming back.
Mhm.
You're having a lot of
Mhm.
people coming back into the trades, steelcraft, knife making, blacksmithing, candy making, leathersmiths. You have a lot of
Silversmithing.
people, silversmithing. You have a lot of people that have embraced a lot of the old ways, bringing it back because
Mhm.
these are not only information, they're art. They're not only utilitarian, they're necessity. This is that when the world does come to an end, the people with the
So do I,
skills are
Jeff.
going to be the people that lead. That's going to be those people that have the knowledge that,
Mhm.
they've learned and they've kept going. Your tradespeople are going to be the leaders of tomorrow because, you can't build me a house with legal books. You can pile enough of them high, but it ain't going to hold together. But if you want a house that doesn't leak, you're going to need a carpenter. If you're going to want to wear, if you're going to wear shoes, you need shoes to go walking with. You're going to need a cobbler.
Well, eventually this is going to go on, and we're already starting to see the results of this a little bit.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was going to do. I was
Where
gonna mention
here
that.
in where was she at? Okay, a 28-year-old woman enrolled into high school as a 17-year-old.
Well,
Okay,
if
so
why not?
she was posing as a 17-year-old student attending a Louisiana high school.
Well, that's what you get when people can self-identify as whatever
Whatever.
at any moment, at any time, and you have to blindly affirm it. You get this kind of situation and worse.
Okay, and get this: this is what they were charged with, or what her and her mother were charged with. One count of injuring public records.
I didn't even know you could do that. You can injure a
Okay,
public record.
yeah. So
Okay.
they injured public records. So supposedly she used a fraudulent passport and a fraudulent birth certificate to enroll.
Wouldn't that be fraud or
Yeah,
identity theft?
yeah.
That wouldn't be injuring a public record.
No.
It's not live. That makes no
Well,
sense.
but at least why did she enter the school? She was trying to learn English.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she didn't go into school. She wasn't, the 33-year-old guy who was trying to pass himself off as a 16-year-old boy so he could go to the prom with the prom queen.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
This was so somebody who is desperate to learn a language, doesn't have social services ability to be able to get it done, come up with a scheme to get it done, and she did it. Okay. All right. I understand why. It wasn't for nefarious purposes. It was
No.
because of somebody trying to advance themselves. This is why we believe in legal immigration versus illegal immigration, because when you're here legally, you have certain things that are available to you that you don't get while living in the shadow, that you can then become a full, well-rounded American citizen and get all the proper blessings that this country has to bestow upon you, as opposed to coming in under the fence and then living in a migrant shack someplace, being told what to pick for how long and how little you'll earn, and that's who they want here. But,
Well,
because God forbid anybody wants to make something of themselves. We
well,
can't have that.
well, let me use this as a transition to I think another issue that is related
Hey,
to all of
Jake.
this and is connected is the corruption that we're seeing. See, the problem is because the corruption is not only is it rampant, but it's becoming so obvious and so accepted, so mainstream normalized that these are all fractures coming out of that. And it's just as important a conversation that, again, is being censored, suppressed, and disavowed by the mainstream news media. That's why we have in England and in the United States the disinformation or organizations and movements. And that is when we look at things like Biden goes from, as you mentioned at the very start of the show today, Frank, the $5 million that now became $30 million. The laptop that shows, besides everything about Hunter, it shows or it alleges the connection to China, that the FBI has now identified that the big guy in all these documents is in fact Biden, that Biden has held on to documents for 40 classified documents for 40 years. There is absolutely no justification for that. 40 years of classified documents that have been held in an unsecure area. It's a violation. Meanwhile, there was a kid that just the kid in Massachusetts, the Air Force reservist who had classified documents, just got indicted, and he's going to go to jail because he broke the law. Mm-hmm. At the core, we have corruption that is happening in our country that is not being investigated, that is being suppressed, that is being told to us, it's okay. It's okay that these people do it, but everyone else is being punished for it. That two-tier justice system, that is corruption.
It's more than a two-tier justice system. Okay. It's a multi-tiered justice system. Okay. And it depends on what fits what narrative on how that justice system is going to be applied. It's not two-tiered. It's not, okay. It's such a multifaceted justice system that nobody can even comprehend how we are supposed to follow the law when we are a nation of laws.
Well, we're supposed to be a nation of laws.
Okay. This woman that I brought up.
Yeah.
And I was more bringing it up to the fact that with her coming to this country, she's native Honduran, coming to this country, she wanted to learn English. She goes, well, everybody else pretends that they are other sex or they are a different age than what they are, or why can't I? Okay, well, why can't I pretend to be a different age so that I can actually further myself and better myself? Okay, because that's the example that we're setting across this country. We're also setting an example that, depending on who you are, the law may or may not apply to you.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I got to take a couple of minutes of break. You guys continue talking. I got 3 dogs that all have a bladder that need to be emptied out. All right. And I have to change shifts because there's 3 dogs currently in the yard that they're not supposed to mingle with. So I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay. But you're right, Mike. And this is the key is, again, we're looking at it's the corruption at so many levels. If you can enter the nation illegally, there is no law. If there's no laws, you can be any person, any type of person. You can abuse every system. Think about Elizabeth Warren, a great example, who has lied to her constituents, lied to the American people, set the example around the world that you can become a United States senator based on a lie that she's a Native American, and she's about as Native American as I am Samoan. That is a fact. She has fact-checked that, did the DNA research, and she's never been Native American. Meanwhile, she reaped the benefits of that lie, both personally and politically.
And claimed it's all because of stories she was told as a child.
Right, which is no justification, it has no basis in science or law. And we have protected her, we have promoted her, and that set the example that laws do not apply, they do not exist. We are becoming lawless. You know, the anarchists, anarchists that are out there are winning, and we are seeing and we are reaping the reward and the fruits of that anarchy and that move towards not just anarchy, but also
actually anarchists are more fair than what we've got.
Huh? Well, yeah.
Anarchists are more fair than what we've got.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, except we haven't reaped the full consequence. Total anarchy is even worse. But we
But
are definitely
hold on
moving
a
in that.
second. If hear me out,
Go ahead.
total anarchy means there are no laws, and
Mhm.
still everybody's treated equally. Okay,
Mm.
yeah, the dominant will rule and all
Yes.
that, but
The Aristotelian version of anarchy, as opposed to Plato's version of anarchy,
Okay.
which is basically total chaos. So go ahead.
okay, but it's still fairer than what we've got going on right now, because whether or not a law applies to you all depends upon what class you belong to, what group you belong to, what
Gender, color,
political
religion.
realm you
Yeah.
belong to. Okay, there is no correlation. You can't even figure out how the law is going to apply from one day to the next.
Yeah, they keep changing. They keep changing. Again, we have that small group of elites
Okay, it's
that are
not
setting
even
the equity
anarchy.
categories.
I don't even know what you would call it, because it doesn't fit any paradigm that we're familiar with.
No, you said
Socialism.
that anarchy by itself, by definition, is a version of order because, for one of the other words, it's basically a status symbol. It's kind of like zero being a number. The lack of a number is a number by itself. We're talking about with what's going on. It's not anarchy. It's not two-tier. It's just basically full-on corruption. It's just basically
Yeah.
there are a bunch of people who are in charge who are saying that we will write the laws as we see fit. And if we say that black is white and white is black one day, and black is purple and white is green the next day, it still counts because it benefits us at the extent of everything else. So you can't say it's anarchy. You can't say it's chaos. It's basically the realization, and you can't even say two-tiered justice system because that would imply it's still being rendered, for want of a better word, fair on this level, then fair on that level, but not fair with both levels combined. Um,
Well, that's why I
it's
say
just, it's just,
authoritarian.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say it's just full on. It's basic corruption, and the rules change every single day. There is no system to it. It's just basically when it suits us, that's how it is. And therein lies the problem: is that we, the American people who give a damn of all stripes, all shapes, need to just basically say, enough. You are not the ones who are going to be writing the rules as you see fit. And again, it's not chaos. It's just you can see the order when it benefits them, and that's
Well,
all it is. So that's where it is. So, go ahead.
well, that's why I started with it's authoritarian. The means
Mhm.
towards that authoritarianism, I'm seeing as an improve both corruption and anarchy. They're using an anarchy or
Mhm.
trend towards anarchy, a dissolution of the laws, a dissolution of the order that we have seen that created America as the greatest nation in the world, the most free, the most powerful, the best quality of life. That's they're using the divisions that they have created. They're using the animosity that they have ginned up, the separation and division, which is anarchic in its action, it's chaotic in its action, to promote the counter, the offer, the open hand of safety and security is being offered to us as opposed to this chaos. And that's when we're seeing what comes with it is a closed glove of anarchy that goes along with it. That's the other hand that we're not looking at, we're not supposed to see. And that's where I think, and that's why we're seeing all these different fractures that are happening. And sadly, we are exporting that around the world. That's why the UK is starting to have that problem. That's why we're seeing that in France and Germany. That's why France is saying that they want to align with China, not because they think China's great. At least China has a rule set they can understand, and the corruption isn't changing every day, and no one knows who's on top, who's the right category today to take advantage. And that's one of the root problems. So we really need to address this. And again, like everything we've been talking about today, these are conversations, even if someone is watching this right now and does not agree with my position or any of our positions, we need to have that conversation, because not having this conversation is absolutely bringing us into a worse position in the world. It is destroying America, and there is no backup plan. Once we are gone, once the Constitution is destroyed, once we remove the amendments, there is no one else who supports life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No one. It disappears from the world forever. And that
It
terrifies
does. Okay. It disappears from the world forever until people demand it again.
if they do, because remember, we're an experiment. We're the only experiment that has come up with this combination and been successful in the history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
No one has done what we have done and been successful ever in the world. And everyone who's tried to copy us since we've been in existence has failed. We are
Because
it.
they
We
didn't
made it.
follow it.
They
They
didn't follow
tried
it
to
properly.
they tried to enact too much authority in the government without giving the freedom and letting the
Absolutely.
people actually.
But that's why I'm saying it disappears forever. And that's or at least foreseeably into the future. And that's why we need, and that's why we have a First Amendment. That's why we need to have these conversations, and why we absolutely cannot stand for what's happening in the news station, as you brought up, Mike. Why we can't have the corruption or even the allegation of corruption, as Jim Jordan has brought forth, as we see that the FBI has acknowledged to an extent, the way that they are manipulating the news media on Trump is evil and bad
Oh,
because of classified documents, but Biden and Pence and Obama are perfectly fine because of this very same situation and same actions.
bring back up the Jim Jordan thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you realize that contempt of Congress is only a misdemeanor?
Yes.
Okay, and the maximum possible fine that somebody could receive for contempt of Congress is $100,000 and 1 year in prison or in jail.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
it's minor at most.
Okay, contempt of Congress is nothing, and threaten somebody with contempt of Congress is laughable.
Yeah,
Honestly,
but it's not meant. No one's supposed to ever get punished with that. It's supposed to be. It's the lesson to put us in place.
it's like
The
AOC
attack.
came out with.
Go, Tom.
Oh no, I was waiting for Michael to continue
Okay,
on with the AOC
where
analogy.
where AOC says that the people no longer fear the government.
They
We were
don't
never
rec-
supposed to fear the government.
No, the government's supposed to fear us.
Yes.
But yeah,
That's
No, the
the
government
point.
does fear us. I think they fear us more than they have in a very, very long time, because basically, again, this groundswell of movement against. They have a combination of the hard left that will never trust government, even though they continue to vote Democrat time and again. I still do not comprehend why that is, if they vote at all. But the conservative movement, I believe, is growing. Is right now it's edgy, and eventually edgy becomes cool, and then eventually cool becomes mainstream. And I honestly believe we kind of saw that with Donald Trump when he was elected, because everyone was so sure that Hillary Clinton was going to get it, and Donald Trump moves in, and a lot of places, particularly the biggest in I think the biggest example was in the elitist media, the mainstream media, really overplayed their hand when they found their beloved Hillary had her rightful claim to the throne taken from her by Donald Trump. And as a result, the media has now just devolved into this. What was it? It's like, what was it like? I think it was as low as 17% people trust the media these days, and
Yeah.
they're instead of doing something to fix the problem, which I believe what was his name, Licht or Light, Licht, at
Like,
CNN tried to do, and they forced him out very quickly. And now they're doubling down on stupid, to use an old cliched term, and that will be their death knell. I honestly do believe that even if Donald Trump is reelected in 2024, the brazen partisan and ideology, even some left wing acquaintances of mine here have acknowledged that the media is so horribly biased and so unbelievably it's blatant, and
but it's
it
always been.
will it's coming back to bite them. And
But it's go ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
I
I
was
was
going to say
already finished up. So go ahead.
the media has always been, since roughly the 1950s, we've always had a media that has been on the left and pushing further left. It's just
Right.
that we have now come to the point where they are more, they believe they have enough control, and they do, of the news media and entertainment that they can swamp us and not be held accountable. Look at what's happening with Hollywood. The Flash has failed. The what She-Hulk has failed. The Marvels will fail. We've seen show after show after show. We've seen movie after movie. We've seen CNN fail, completely fail. Tried to revamp themselves, or rather rename themselves, and they fail. Public trust in print media as well as online and cable news is at an all-time low or very near to it. Why are these things happening? Because they don't have to care anymore, because they think that the consequence will not last long enough for them to suffer the full impact of it, because they are swamping us. They are training the next generation to accept obedience, and that this is the norm. This is why they keep doing this, even though they're failing and failing, is that the next generation don't know better. This is all they have ever seen. This is all they have ever known. And as long as they keep this up, they make it through the next 5 years. We start seeing those kids are the voters, those are the consumers, and they don't know any other answer other than this is what we always do. I think that's it's very insidious, but I think it's very true that this is part of that indoctrination. The indoctrination is part of that authoritarian movement, which happens to be a very socialist movement that
Hmm.
says, yeah, this is all you've ever had. This is what freedom equals. There is no other choice.
Right. But again, back to what I was saying though, the message
Mhm.
is not getting across because remember that the teenagers who rebelled in the 60s were raised as children in the 50s, and they saw the what we call the 50s ideology, the traditionalist ways, and they said, you know what, we've been brought up in this type of viewpoint, we've been indoctrinated into this viewpoint, and we'd like to try something different because clearly we're not entirely happy with the way things are going. And that's where the 60s, the proverbial hippies movement, came from. We're seeing the same thing now. We have people who have been brought up in this basic leftist indoctrination on a regular basis. There is finally seeing some pushback, particularly from the young. And I honestly do believe that the kids who are being brought up in the Pride Month, transgender, um, take the shot, don't question. Government is good, government is mother, government is father, government is all. I honestly believe in the next decade we're going to see some serious blowback. I mean, take a look at Fox News. Okay, would you anyone on a conservative viewpoint would believe 10 years or even 5 years ago that Fox News would suddenly drop below MSNBC in just a matter of months with the termination of one person? But it's happening because people on both sides are waking up. People on both sides are figuring out We are being manipulated. We are being played. You can go on YouTube. There are a whole and Instagram and TikTok, and there are a growing number of African American, Black, Hispanic people who are making videos saying, they're leading this is their term, not mine. They're walking off the plantation, so to speak. I think Candace Owen made that reference.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many people. You scroll through the YouTube shorts. I see so many people who are pointing out that they're not buying into the narrative anymore. They're waking up. The blinders are coming off, so to speak, and that's why Fox News is their ratings are going in the toilet. That's why Marvel Comics and DC Comics their sales are in the toilet right now, as opposed to manga or European comics. It's the reason that the Marvel movies are not making money hand over fist anymore. It's the reason that
Yeah. Well,
Disney's
Marvel started losing its market share when Disney took them over and started making them woke.
Oh, they were losing even
No, they
before
were
then.
full.
I'm a
Yeah.
big comic book fan, and I saw a mass exodus of people just dropping all mainstream comics, the big two, and even Image and Dark Horse, as far back as 2010, 2011, and
It
that's
was
when we
about
dropped it ourselves.
It was 2013 when they introduced the new lineup of characters to replace the current ones. It was mostly the 2099 movement in comics, where they were introducing the more progressive, like Iron Heart, the Miles Morales, the Spider Gwen. All that was coming out roughly about 2013.
Lady Thor, the whole bit, yeah.
Yeah, Lady Thor. And that was that transition, which was about, I think, 2 years before Disney took over Marvel, which is when we saw them transition from Marvel movies like Iron Man 1 into what became phase 2 of the Marvel movement. And that and the transition really took hold after the plan at Marvel ended with Endgame, and they started phase 4, which was a complete removal of everything that was prior and went back to that 2013 model.
Mhm.
But all of these are elements of, again, we're talking about these elements of the corruption. And as much as I would like to agree with you that there is this pushback, and I've heard people mention it before, but I don't think that's not a lasting position. It's not universal enough across the country. Let me explain what I mean. Right here, you can see these are the 20 Republicans who voted to not censure Adam Schiff. Now, for people who are not familiar, Adam Schiff, who's on the screen right now, representative in California, spent 3 years going onto national TV, talking with Rachel Maddow predominantly, telling the American people he had evidence, keyword here, evidence that proved there was Russian collusion by Donald Trump in the 2016 election. And there were 3 separate investigations, including by Democrats, that proved he was wrong, that he lied to the American people. No such evidence ever existed. Because of that, it took them from 2019 until today to actually finally hold him accountable for that. And 20 Republicans, and I can point out in particular of these 20, you have Tom Massey, who's more of an independent than pretty much anyone in Congress at this time, and also Mark Molinaro, who I have personally met and interviewed several times now, who is a middle-of-the-road Republican, voted to protect Adam Schiff. We can't say that we have a movement that is growing in this nation that is conservative and a pushback against the ever leftward push of progressivism and socialism when we have the middle of the road and even independent individuals in Congress that are willing to protect the corruption in America. I don't see that as that's the problem.
Well, again, you're referring to, again, The people who are in power now, what I see is on the ground. I see people around me. I don't look for change in government right now. I see the change in government happening over the next several years. There are those such as I think Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, um, DeSantis. Uh, Also see it in Kerry Lake. People like them who they basically the forefront. But it's like I said, it is. And when I say groundswell, I mean it's starting. But I do believe it's starting from the ground up. I don't see it as again top down. And in all honesty, if we want this movement, this swing of the pendulum in our direction, so to speak, to happen, we want it to happen from the ground up. We want it from a stronger foundation. Remember, it was the hippies of the '60s were the fringe. Then in about the '70s, those hippies had influence. We're seeing the movement right now. We are the proverbial hippies, so to speak, the conservatives. We're seeing the movement happening right now. We've seen it happen in the past several years. It is growing here. Uh, and what's the word I'm looking for? I don't I don't see any politicians right now who really are or any political movement in DC, in the Beltway, even on a state level, even the governorships. I don't see a whole lot of conservative pushback for what I'm seeing. What I am seeing, and it's something. It's in the news. It's definitely in social media. Um, we're seeing geeks and gamers and nerdrotic and people who were simply just about pop culture who are now becoming politically motivated. Why? Because the leftist movement, the Marxist movement, the agenda pushing has tainted that which they love. Star
But wait a
Wars,
minute.
Star Trek,
Let
Doctor
me push
Who.
back against that a little bit
Yeah,
because
but
Nerdrotic and Geeks and Gamers, Eric July, which are, for people who aren't familiar, they deal with entertainment, movies, comic books. They're commentators on the entertainment sphere and very popular. They're not Republicans or conservatives. They're independents and libertarians. This is, and again, that goes to my point. Yeah, they're becoming more political because the environment became more political, but they're not part of this conservative movement that we need, I believe, along with libertarians, absolutely, and independents, but it's not pushing back to push the pendulum the other way. If anything, they would hold it where it is. Not every single one of those individuals, of course, but overall, they're more, and that's the problem. The pushback is to hold things where we are, not to push things back to what we were. Do you see what I'm saying?
I will, and I do, and I again my Pollyanna-ish ways. I see that as a good baby step, and we don't have to swing it all the way to the far right. It would be good just to stop the progressive left, the progression towards the left, and then when we stop the progression, it easier to swing it toward the right because there will always be extremists on both sides. But when the extremists on the left become discredited through their own hubris, the extremists on the right might gain a little credibility. Might. I'm not saying I want a far right extreme society. I don't see that any better than a far left extreme society. But if the libertarians, as you call them, are able to
They
stop
often say that
movement to the
themselves.
left and keep it in place, then what happens is that we have the Overton window and everything is, well, see from your perspective, everything's moving toward the left. If we can stop the movement, the people on the right, well, again, they'll become the edgy cool ones. And people will start to pay attention to that and move it toward that direction. Bringing it back toward the 50-yard line would be ideal. Um, I don't see it again. I don't see it happening tomorrow or in the next couple of years. I do, however, believe it will be happening. In my lifetime, in our lifetime, I truly do believe that because look how far the left got in 50 years.
But
They
I don't
started in
see
the
it.
60s. It's now what 2023. You don't see it.
No, I'm 55. This isn't new to me, and I
Uh-huh.
understand what you're saying, but from my perspective and what I have seen over the last 5 decades, this isn't a new thing. As an example, there's the 2010 Tea Party movement, which was very even stronger than what we see today, and it was absolutely on the ground level, and that failed. The key,
Mhm.
the way, if I were to believe it, what I need to see is a the voting. We need to see more voting. We need to see more conservative leaning voting, maybe even libertarians, third party voting. We need to see people. And right now, there is an 88% reelection rate for everyone in Congress. Once you make it to your second term, you have an 88% chance of being reelected. Congress has a confidence right now, or public confidence rating of about 16, maybe between 16 and 20%, depending on which source you're looking at. People don't believe in Congress. They don't believe in the legal system. They don't believe in government right now. And yet they're reelecting these people for decades at a time. I cannot believe that we are truly pushing back on the pendulum, even to get to the 50-yard line, if we're not willing to make the change. And we're not even talking about that change, and we need to. You see my point there?
I do see it. But like I say, it just apparently I guess you and I are seeing different. I saw that note by
That's
Jan
fine.
to someone has a lot of background noise. I don't think it's on. I don't think it's on my end, so I
No,
apologize
it's
if it
Frank.
is. But
It's Frank's breathing.
oh, okay.
It's from his microphone on this headphone.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. You okay, Frank?
Oh yeah, it's been a long day.
That's just him. That's just him normal breathing. That's why I know what it is. I know
I
the
see.
way his
Okay.
breathing sounds.
Okay.
Here,
Was
here's the
listening
thing:
to
is
Zoom,
we aren't
so
seeing any changes. We're still seeing the same people voted in year after year after year. Okay. I mean, if we're starting to see a change, we'd start seeing an increase of people being unseated. Okay, regardless of whether they are seated by somebody from the same party or not, we're not seeing people removed from office. We're seeing the same people, and it doesn't matter what level of politics you go into. Okay, whether it's local elections or you're looking at the federal elections, across the board, people are getting reseated into the positions they have. The only time somebody else new is seated is when that person decides to leave that position, either because they run for a higher office or because they retire or die. Okay. You don't see very many people unseated that have made it past a second term.
where for if I to again to make my point, where are you seeing this, or where are you looking to not see this? Where you're not seeing this, you're looking in the media, the standard media, or are you looking on social media?
Look at the election results.
The election
Well,
results
yeah,
have been,
I
That's all you
the
have to look at.
yeah, the numbers
You don't have to
for,
look for media.
yeah, it's recorded by
Look at the
Congress.
numbers. They
Yeah,
don't lie.
election by
If there was a
election.
movement to start changing stuff, you'd start seeing more and more politicians get unseated.
Yeah, you can
You'd
look
see
at
more and
every.
more politicians not reelected each year.
Yeah, you can look at the reelection rate as reported by Congress itself, going back not just in 2022 or 2020. You can go back for the last. I've gone back as far as 4 decades, and the number hasn't changed. It is
The
varied
only
between on
time
any one
somebody leaves
individual.
office
I'm
isn't
sorry.
because they were unelected,
Mhm.
it's because they decided to leave.
Right. It's the normal rate has varied between 82 and 92% for reelection rates. The, it is almost exactly equal. In fact, it's a little bit higher that people will retire out of office than the number of people who will either be unelected or who die in office. In fact, it's Reelected is the highest percentage, followed by retirement, death, and then the least likely outcome is for someone to be voted out of office. Until those numbers change on not just one election, although it hasn't happened in about 4 decades where we haven't seen that number be like this, but you would have to see it not just once, but 2 or 3 elections. I'd be happy just to see it happen once. We haven't had an election under 80% in, if I remember correctly, 25 years on reelection. That has to change for us to truly change this continuing push of the Overton window, this continuing march towards socialism and leftist ideology. And that's my concern. I want you to be right, Tom. I want you to prove me wrong. I want to see that change. I hope I am misunderstanding the data, or that the change is happening and I just haven't
I'd
seen the
love
data
nothing
catch up.
more to see that change. Okay, but the numbers don't prove it.
Well, again, as I said before, I'm not seeing the change in the political spectrum. I'm seeing it on the ground. I'm seeing on people who are not yet old enough or have not yet run for office. I'm seeing it in schools. I'm seeing it on, again, more pop culture genres like gaming sites and video game sites and MMORPG sites and everything like that. There is a movement. Again, you're not seeing it in the news. You're not seeing it in the voter stats. You're not seeing it in census taking. But you can see it when you go on Fortnite and you listen to the players. When you go on
but talk
the
is
comic
talk.
store.
But well, let me clarify.
Talk is where
because
it starts.
I see that. I agree with you. I've seen that for a long time. It's always been there and I play video games. I watch anime. I'm into that realm of entertainment. I know what you're talking about. Not specifically Fortnite. I don't play that one, but I understand it. But here's the thing. The reason why and I know Michael, look at the voting and the elections and the primaries, because it's not the first time we've seen this wave. Again, I will point to 2010, the Tea Party movement, which was a wave of conservatism. If we do not see this, it is the same thing as hashtag Boko Haram bring the girls back by Michelle Obama. It is useless unless, and I'm not saying this against you, Tom, I'm saying this to the people who are watching, who may be listening to this conversation. You must be politically active. You must come out and vote. You must select different people in the primary process if you want to see actual change. Because if you don't, you will get people like I just showed you with Mark Molinaro. You will get people who will profess, and we saw this with Richard Hanna in 2010. They will profess that they are this change, they are the harbingers of this movement. They will use the public to gain that position, and they will betray the public. And that is my fear. So it must transition from video games, it must transition from social media, it must become people voting, actively voting. They have to do it, because it's not enough to just have it and movies go back to being good movies, or video games are good video games. Social media is more fun or more lighthearted or even more evenly balanced in conversation. It must be voting. Otherwise, it will not last.
And I still profess that I think it will. It may. I don't think it's.
I'm not saying it won't.
Right
I'm
away.
not. I'm not saying it won't or that
yeah.
you're wrong. I'm saying.
And I'm not. And I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying I think it might. I'm seeing. I'm dating myself. Believe it or not, I'm actually 57 years old.
What?
I may not look it, but I'm actually. Yeah.
What?
I'm 50. You didn't know that? I was
Oh,
born
wow.
April 18th, 1966. I'm older than you, Bess. Or is it
Wow.
Austin? My apologies.
Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay.
God,
you
Clean
look
living. What
like
can
you're
I
like
say?
30.
Yep. No, I'm 57 years old.
I
was
thought I
born
looked young.
66.
Damn. Okay. Then
Okay,
Anyways,
since 1964. I'm going to show you this.
right. Okay.
Over 80% of the House of Representatives has been reelected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Every election cycle since 1964. In the Senate, in 1980, that dropped to below 60. It's still nowhere near half.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and that 88 is the one that I was thinking of where it dropped below 80%. That was the last time it dropped under 80.
But in the House of Representatives, since 1964, it hasn't dropped below 80%.
Yeah. And that's my concern there, Tom.
Mm-hmm. It's well, believe it or not, it's my concern as well. But I'm looking. I guess again, as I said, Pollyannish. Maybe I'm looking at it glass half full. But I'm seeing again. You were referring to the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party movement wasn't a failure. It was just tamped down by the establishment that
Yeah.
did not want to see a groundswell. But they didn't. Again, as the old saying, they didn't stamp out the fire. They didn't put the fire out completely. Um,
True.
the Tea Party movement is still around. It's still active. I think it's
Mhm.
taking the smart move. It's basically staying off the radar, for want of a better word. But they're still out there and they're still
Yeah.
doing stuff. And
Some of them.
again, where again, I go back to what I said before. We're not seeing it yet. We may not see it for the next couple of next election. Maybe even in 2028, we won't even see much of it. But I do see it happening after that. We spent 50 years sitting on our hands, and then suddenly we're acting all surprised that Marxist leftist ideology suddenly became mainstream. No, it took half a century to get there. We just didn't do anything about it. I don't see us fixing that. And yes, it does need to be fixed overnight or in a couple of years. They have entrenched themselves. They've dug in like proverbial ticks. And it's not going to be easy to remove them, and it's not going to happen right away. I, however, am seeing, even if it's not in again, in the Beltway or in the election processes, I am seeing just here and there more than I did a decade ago and more than I did a decade before that of people who are waking up. And they not necessarily are all right-wing conservatives. Again,
Right.
libertarians. I've even seen the true, genuine far-left anarchist, the people who just do not like any sort of authority whatsoever. Even they are saying, you know what? Government does not work for me. We keep voting. I mean, heck, I've got a couple of friends who were diehard Bernie Sanders supporters. They'll never vote for him again, ever, because they finally woke up. Not saying they're going to vote for Trump in 2024, but as far as they're concerned, the Bernie Sanders can take a flying leap in their viewpoint. Who they'll vote for in 2024, I can't say, but they are waking up. These are people who were really, really hardcore pro-socialists, and they're realizing. And every time I see it, I saw this even back in when Obama was going up against Mitt Romney. There were, even though Obama trounced Romney, and it may have been a good thing, who never knows. Even then, they were saying Obama was not speaking for us. Obama was not doing any good for us. Obama was there we voted for Obama because he would do this for the black community, and he didn't do any of it.
No, I agree with
I am
you.
seeing the disgruntled left, the extremist left, the libertarians, the conservatives, and the right wing are all figuring out that they are all, to some extent or another, on the same page. Not necessarily in the exact same spot, but on the same page.
No, but
This is a good thing. This is a good
no,
thing.
I agree with you, Tom. I do agree with you. I'm just trying to emphasize, not necessarily to you. I'm speaking to the audience that they have to transfer that energy to voting. They have to transfer it to politics.
Absolutely.
That's the part I'm emphasizing. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that has to be the movement. Otherwise, it will not have the impact we're hoping, and I agree with you, that we hope to see.
All right. You guys, can you guys hear me at this point?
Of course we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right. Part of the problem
I
with
did look.
everybody voting, we go back and we look at things like the Tea Party movement. Let's go back even a little further and go back to Contract with America. First time in 47 years that Republicans took control of both the House and the Senate. What did our illustrious leaders, because that's when they started calling themselves leaders instead of representatives, do with the trust that we put in them? They squandered it.
Mm-hmm.
When we gave them the trust and we gave them the House and the Senate with the Tea Party, what did they do? They squandered it. No matter how many times we keep giving them our trust, our faith, and our allegiance to ask them to please, finally, at long last, represent the will of we, the people, they squander it. Time and time again, whether it was done for the left or that's done for the right, because the promise is worth more than the fulfilled promise ever will be. Nobody gets reelected after fulfilling a promise. They only get reelected after they make a promise they know they can't fulfill, because they can always come back the next time around and say, if we only had more votes, if we only had more time, if we only had more money. What Tom is getting to is the fact that people are finally coming to the realization that even though it's a two-party system, it's a one-party class, and that one party, we the people, are not invited to that one party. And we might like to think that the left viewpoints are getting pandered to, or the right-wing views are being pandered to. The bottom line is the political class view gets pandered to. And so long as they can keep bouncing the ball back and forth across the tennis court, we keep watching the ball and forgetting to watch the game. We're not even allowed in the stadium anymore. And until the people of both the left and the right realize that we're not invited, we're going to keep watching the same damn tennis ball. And the left and the right, really, when you break it down, we have a lot more in common than we do that separate us. Most of the things that separate us are social causes. But when it comes to government causes, I really don't think, regardless of what political party you're in, you want more government interfering with your life. You might want more assistance. You might want more help. You might think that the government should be able to do more or less, societally speaking. But when it comes to the individual, people would probably rather be left to their own devices. When people start realizing that we have more in common than we do that separate us, and that what separates us is the political class versus the people, we might have an opportunity to start putting people in charge to represent us rather than claim to lead us. We don't need leaders. Americans are the leader of our own destiny. We need somebody to represent us so that our destinies can be fulfilled. And the best way for my destiny to be fulfilled is to stay the hell out of my way. And I think that would describe most of us. If we left government out of our lives and we could do the things that we would like to do, we would have an opportunity to do so. I'm sitting in my workshop. I have a stack of drawings, blueprints, writings of all different kinds of things that I would love to be able to bring to a free market. I don't have $15,000 to $50,000 to get a prototype of each one of these things made. Why has it become so expensive to advance an idea in this country? To get a patent, to get a copyright, to have something that you can do to promote yourself? Because government has made it so difficult for the little guy to do it, because the big guy is who controls the special interests. So the only people who get to bring new things to market are the people that can afford to fail. Those of us that can't afford to fail wind up sitting there with all kinds of dreams that go unrealized because government puts roadblocks in our way. And an idea should pass or fail based on the merit, not pass or fail based on whether or not you have more money to market the idea. And government makes it so difficult for any of us to do anything for ourselves that if we all of us left and right actually saw a society where government was there to not hinder us, we'd be a hell of a lot more productive. And I think a productive society would probably have a lot less to worry about than all the social bullshit that is constantly cluttering us up if all we were concerned about were doing better for ourselves and our families. We would have a lot less to argue about.
Well, if you notice, I've got something up on the screen.
Yep.
And basically, this is from 1790 all the way up to 1994. The percentages of the House of Representatives that were reelected. And you can see until really 1930s, we saw, and again, if you look at our history, 1930s wasn't such a great time, but we saw most over 80% of people reelected in the 30s. You get to the 40s, we see that drop down. That's where we start the greatest generation, quote unquote. And then by the 60s, here we are. We're back up over 80%, and we consistently stay there. There's a couple years where, yeah, it wasn't that case, but we consistently stay there. The line above that is the number of incumbents that were reelected, i.e., they are returning. Okay, they'd already. And early on, yeah, we see that number is actually quite a bit higher than the number of people reelected in the House. But here we're seeing it almost even out. And that's not even necessarily a good thing. If anything, we want to see a huge divide between the incumbent being reelected and the percentage of House members reelected.
Well, do you also notice that the incumbency rate increases with the advents of technologies?
Mm-hmm.
Because the larger we have a technology base, whether it be in newspaper, print, internet, television, radio, the more that people get to hear a message, the more the incumbent rate stays the same. And when you're trying to break into a political realm and you don't have the budget that an incumbent has, you have little to no chance of ever unseating that incumbent because you don't have the finances to outproduce their messaging.
No, I would push back on that, Frank, in that I think it's more the Kennedy effect, where we have a change, a transition in politicians to be more appealing, like Hollywood, like entertainers, to be able to speak and to look more appropriately.
All right.
And
Well,
that
let me
goes along with the
all right, but
technology.
let me shoot that down in the ass too with two words: Jerry Nadler.
Oh God.
Okay. I don't want to hear that anything has to do with the Kennedy effect about this because we're not talking about people that are looking at the radio or looking at the TV and comparing the same debate. What I'm talking about is the amount of money that these incumbent
true.
candidates are able to pour into a race. Why would an incumbent who's holding a job that pays $175,000 a year have a $30 or $40 million budget to keep a $175,000 job? And how is somebody like myself, if I decided that I was going to run for Congress or Senate in North Carolina, ever going to amass that kind of war chest? When you have technology at your behest and you have a media that's willing to play your messages and you have the finances to go along with it, you have no chance of outperforming an incumbent unless they die. And even when Patrick Moynihan gave up his seat, they gave it to Hillary Clinton, who didn't have to campaign. That whole fiasco charade debate thing that she shared the stage with that little Dutch boy looking guy up there in New York was just a charade. until and unless you're able to start getting money out of politics, you're never going to be able to get incumbents out of politics because they
Well,
only die in office or have to resign in scandal. That's the only way you ever get them out.
I want to actually point something else out. Okay. When we start seeing this huge upward trend of the percentage of House members being reelected is starting with the start of the progressive period. The
Yeah.
Right
progressive
about
period
1910.
started in the 1900s,
Yeah.
early 1900s. And as starting with 1900, you start seeing that this trend is continuously going up.
And what coincides with the progressive period? The institution of the
Bureaucrat-
individual
bureaucrats.
liberty tax. Well, no, it was the institution of the income tax, of personal income tax, because that's when
1910, yeah.
politicians finally realized that the best way to get a vote is to buy it by giving back money to the people they took it from. As
Well,
soon
you
as the
start seeing
government
the
figured
income
out that,
tax. Okay, but that was 1960.
right, and as soon as they
Okay,
figured out how to
but
pay
the
the people for the
progressive
vote,
movement of having government offices, government bureaucracies, started in the early 1900s, 1902, around in there. And that's when you really start seeing this trend of us reelecting. And the reason why is because politicians that are being elected can always say, it's not my fault, it's the bureaucracy.
well, that's their fallback. That's the fallback plan. Nobody has any personal responsibility for their own failures or anything. And we'll get back to this censure thing against what's his
Schiff.
face over there,
Adam
Schiff.
Schiff.
Right, who I believe is the illegitimate son of Andy Kaufman and a used Q-tip.
Oh, don't insult Andy Kaufman.
Well, that's what he looks like to me. I reached out to Thomas Massey's office, and Thomas Massey, I got a return statement saying about anybody who was complaining about his no vote on the censure was because he voted no based on the constitutionality of it, of the censure vote, saying that it would be 88 years of pay required to pay the fine. Well, considering most of these friggin' incumbents stay in office for 88 years, well, you know, I'm sure he could afford it, and Schiff is worth a hell of a lot more than the 16 million they were looking to fine him. But I challenged him with one thing. If you're concerned about the constitutionality of the bill that was presented for censure, why haven't you written one that conforms within the constitutional guidelines you're asking for? Why would you wait for someone else? If you agree that the man should be censured for lying to the American people for 3 years straight, and you're going to vote no on the bill that was presented based on the constitutionality of it, why haven't you offered one of your own? Silence. So even our most steadfast, loyal, conservative leaders that we have in Washington, D.C., are nothing of the sort. Because if I tell someone, hey, you're doing that wrong, and I'm not willing to go in and do it right, then my complaint is just as worthless as their wrongdoing. If you're not willing to act and do the right thing, then don't even offer an opinion on it.
And actually, Massey is wrong about the constitutionality of removing a representative.
Well, it wasn't even a matter of removing; it was just a matter of censuring, which is a totally different thing. It's not an impeachment; it's a punishment. It's a financial punishment along with the punishment of position.
Okay,
You know, he'd be restricted from certain activities in the future. He should be impeached from office, but we'll have to leave it to the voters in his district to do that, and they're not going to do that. I just don't understand why Massey didn't.
Section 5 of the Constitution is where it talks about this.
Yeah, I don't believe when he Massey said, I don't believe it was about the constitutionality of it. I think he just said that. I think he was blowing smoke in order to try
Well,
to
he
appease
also
Frank. So,
well he also had a little backhanded thing too, saying, "Oh, well, we also have to be careful what we do to them because eventually they'll come do it to us." Well, here's an idea: don't lie to the fucking American people, and you won't have to worry about being censured. How's that?
Well, yeah.
How's that? Protect your job by doing your job the way your oath was written. Do your job in accordance to the Constitution, and you don't have to worry about being censured. You wouldn't have to worry about losing your job. You wouldn't worry about losing the faith and confidence of the constituency. Do your fucking job. Do it the right way, and you don't have to worry about it. If they like what you do, you keep your job. If they don't like what you do, they replace you. But don't give me this dog and pony crap about, oh, they're going to come back and do the same thing to us. We have been losing to everything they have been doing to us for the last 16 years. And right now, you're going to sit there worried about whether or not it's fair play and give me some excuse that it's not constitutional? Come on.
Well, right here it says it's fully constitutional. Each house may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member.
All right, and they had more than enough votes to institute the proper punishment. Now, is $16 million in fines? I don't know where Bobert came up with the numbers for that.
It's probably a house rule.
I don't know who came up with the numbers, but it was more than appropriate, and they had more than enough justification for the vote. So this smokescreen about a constitutionality is just that. It's a lie. And I'm really stunned and surprised at Massey. But then again, I sit and I look at who voted for the last omnibus spending bill, and nothing surprises me at all.
Yeah.
It's all a big party, and we are not invited.
Okay. We go on and on about spending here, okay, and how much trouble we are because of the amount of debt we're in. And here's another example of it, okay. You brought up the omnibus bill. Well, here's where part of that omnibus money went.
Eckerd College Marine Science Program receives $1 million congressionally direct award. All right, now, what are they going to study in this $1 million study?
Well, here's what they're getting.
We've had shrimp on a treadmill. Is this going to be oyster on a stair climber?
Could be. So they're funded by the U.S. Department of Education. The award will allow the college to purchase a 35-foot wheelchair-accessible sightseer research vessel, a 24-foot Cape Horn research vessel, a seawater monitoring system, a laser-based flow cytometer, research lab benches, environmental chambers used for lab experiments, and other equipment from microscopes to centrifuges.
And not one goddamn fishing pole. I see. Now I understand the price of the boats. I'm looking at boats now and I see how expensive they are. So I can see how a wheelchair accessible sightseeing 35-foot cabin cruiser could cost some money. That's probably $300,000 or $400,000 all in itself. But what is the necessity?
That's what I'm looking for.
I was not aware that there was such a tremendous influx of accessibility challenged marine biologists. And you would also think that wouldn't the Americans with Disabilities Act have already required that the school have made these kinds of accommodations for students that are physically restricted? Why would we be having to pay for them again now? Unless the school was not acting in accordance for all of these years, and instead of paying the fine that would be attributed for violating the ADA, we are now paying the money to bail them out of their failure.
Hmm.
Them frisky whales. Promiscuous on cocaine.
Funny.
I don't know, Dale. Dale, we got a lot of them little submarines that have sunk on the way up from Costa Rica. That I'm sure have you know dumped more than a couple of payloads of cocaine in the water.
So yeah, it doesn't really go into why they needed this, other than quote unquote to stay at the forefront of marine science.
All right, but this is a school, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is the tuition for?
Well, that's it. What the hell's their endowment for? Okay. The federal government's not supposed to be giving money to schools. Okay. Again, I'm going to go back to the Constitution on this. Okay. Article 1, Section 8 very plainly says, let me find it real quick. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by this is the important part. This is the part they always don't look at. By securing the for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. In other words, the federal government has authority over copyrights and patents, but nothing else as far as promoting science and useful arts.
All right, so in exchange for the money, the federal government will now take ownership over any patentable materials that is
No,
produced. What does
no,
this mean?
that's not what it says. Okay, let me share this so that you can understand this. Okay, the only authority Congress has in regards to science and the arts is to set forth the laws that pertain to copyrights and patents that protect intellectual property put forth by authors and inventors. Okay, beyond that, they don't have any authority to make grants for that type of stuff. Okay, it says right here to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Nowhere in there does it say to provide grants or money to promote the progress of science and useful arts. Okay, it specifically says how they're supposed to promote it. And that's the part the Congress continually refuses to comply with. They read that first section and that's all they go with. And they believe that they can just start throwing money out there because for every scientific thing or whatnot.
Well, what you got to do is you got to look at that school and find out which one of our congressional or senatorial representatives is an alumni of that school, or has a kid at that school, or a spouse at that school, or a spouse that's an alumni of that school. And you got to find out which one, because that's who put it in the bill. That's part of the pork that they all say they don't want, but they all vote for anyway. Damn the Constitution. That's what they say. Full speed ahead.
Well, see,
To paraphrase a
the
nautical
federal
term.
government, and we've talked about this many, many times on this show. The federal government has zero authority over education. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say anything about education.
It also doesn't say anything about marriage.
Exactly.
But the courts went and decided that too. Our own Supreme Court, who should know that the federal government has no say over marriage, decided to intervene in marriage, which is a
Mhm.
civil construct, which is a religious construct, which the federal government has no business dealing with.
And if anything, marriages, the rules for marriages should be left up to the states. And we had that discussion as well, that the biggest reason why the federal government started um, recognizing marriages was to increase taxes. It's to generate revenue. That's all it was for.
Right, and the whole marriage debate thing was a matter of garnering votes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, big party, no invitation. Well, listen, gentlemen, it's 11:30. I've been up and at it since 5:45 this morning. I drove Lori drove 600 miles. Well, 400 miles. I only drove about 200. I neglected to drive the rest of the way. I am going to be signing off this evening because I am exhausted.
Actually, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up
Okay.
because we have been going for a little over 2.5 hours. We've got a lot of discussions. There's still a ton more that we could discuss, but we need to go ahead and wrap this up. Everyone that was in the chat, thank you for all the comments, questions, the input. We appreciate it. Without you, we wouldn't have a show. Okay. To all of our viewers, thank you for watching. We do appreciate you being here. We do appreciate you watching.
And before we go, as a final note, tomorrow, no, in a half hour it'll be tomorrow. This Sunday, is Father's Day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To all you guys out there who have been there to raise a child, to be a role model for a child, whether that child is yours or not, happy Father's Day to you. Continue to be strong. Continue to be a role model. Continue to defend. That's the next generation. And without good, positive male influence in these children's lives, they're not going to have much of a future. So continue to do the good job. Step up, stand up, and keep the work going. Happy Father's Day. Give your kid a hug. They'll remember you for it.
Okay. On that
And
note,
somebody who
we're
just
going to go
lost
ahead
his
and wrap
father
this
last
up.
year, also, I was going to say, as somebody who just lost his father last year, definitely good time to show appreciation and respect.
Sorry to hear that.
So,
My
he
condolences
had a
there.
good life. He was a war hero in Vietnam. Frank's saw my Facebook page. He was buried with honors at Arlington last year. It was a very austere ceremony. Um, a hell of a good send off, if I may say. So,
Definitely.
in all honesty, I think right now, if obviously given the choice, prefer him back here, but you know how it is. So,
Yeah.
you really don't appreciate, as I said, the old adage, but you don't really appreciate what it is you have until it's gone. And I can now say mine's gone. And for those who are more fortunate in the situation, there's something to think about.
Well, on that note, I do want to bring up this. Okay. As fathers and as men, we have an obligation and a responsibility, and even mothers do as well, to teach future generations the tools that are needed to protect liberty. Okay. And to preserve the principles that this country was founded upon. And while you're out there reflecting on your fathers and reflecting on your future generations, your legacies, reflect on what type of world they will grow up in if we lose few remaining freedoms that we have left.
Good point.
Okay, it is literally on us, the fathers across this country, to start to bring back this country to the principles of freedom, because principles of liberty. The Constitution says that we ordain this Constitution for our posterity. Our posterity is future generations. And we're only a few generations away from losing it. We've already lost so much because the people refuse to be involved. Okay, I put up the link. I'm not going to go into the whole spill on that.
Mhm.
Okay, because you can get involved with us, but you can do so much on your own, with or without us. But you just need to start doing something. And as I've said many, many, many times, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people cannot exist without the people being involved.
Very true.
It was Benjamin Franklin when asked what was the the old adage, when someone asked Benjamin Franklin on July 4th,
If you can
76,
keep it.
what have you given us? And his response was, a republic,
A republic, if you can
if you
keep
can
it.
keep it.
Yeah.
But the
All
thing
right,
is,
guys.
if you can keep it, does that mean republic as long as you don't misplace it or anything like that. If you keep it, means you have to work for it every single
Yes.
day. And too many
Every
people
day.
have forgotten that we need to work for it every single day. But as I've said before, I do believe people are figuring this out finally and are finally doing something a little bit at a time. But again, to sound awfully cliched, every journey starts with one step, little steps, little fire, small moves. It will add up. Yes,
No.
there's just 4 of us here talking on this little page right here. There are a lot of other people doing the exact same thing. Eventually, it will grow. It will get bigger. Go ahead.
I'm stepping that way because that's the way the bed is. So
Yeah.
we love you guys. Listen, we always end off on a high note. You guys be safe, shoot straight. We love you guys. Join us back here next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Yes, it's copyright infringement, but that's okay. I mean, we're good.
Hey, thanks
Batman's
again
a
for
friend of
inviting
ours.
me. I do appreciate it. I hope I wasn't too much of a disappointment. Thanks a lot for letting me.
Not
Tom,
at all.
No,
Not
we
at all.
enjoyed having you. Thank
It
you
was a
for,
pleasure to
thank
be
you for
here.
coming on.
Our
Okay,
doors
you're
are
always welcome back.
Thank you.
Our doors always open, and
Well,
invites
thank you. I
always
very
go
much
out.
take you up on that offer. Thanks again.
Definitely.
All right, guys. You guys be safe, shoot straight. Catch you next week.
Take care.